was that they're going to limit the total number of tags sold to 10%. I do believe it's going to make it a little more difficult for the non-resident guy to stay on top of what's going on and make sure they're paying attention. They said that the data was inconclusive and not accurate enough.
Welcome to the Built to Hunt podcast, brought to you by the team of hunt advisors at the Huntin Fool magazine, where we are dedicated to helping our members go on more hunts with better information. Join Huntin Fool today at huntinfool.com.
All right, welcome to another Built to Hunt podcast. Austin and Garth here in the Cedar City Huntin Fool office, and we are getting a lot of questions about Arizona because Coues deer, mule deer, all those archery over-the-counter seasons open up shortly. So we're going to get this podcast out to you quick, but we've brought on a special guest coming at you from Arizona. Welcome, Mr. Brian Rimsza. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Great.
We're great, I think.
It's raining here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's greening up.
We got a bunch of rain this weekend, so
we need it, right? We're down in the 80s now, so we're loving summer. I don't know about you guys, but
yeah, it's not. We haven't seen 80 for a few months.
Not even at 7 o'clock in the morning.
No.
We're lucky if it drops below 90.
Oh man, I don't miss that part of growing up in Phoenix. That's for sure. I like this weather up here, but a lot of guys, over the years have been to Arizona. Now, typically December, January is a nice time to go to Arizona. Obviously, that's over-the-counter seasons for archery deer. But Brian, you have been a part of this archery deer shift, change. I mean, from my days in Arizona, I remember seeing your first pictures with giant, stupid, ridiculously big Coues deer and your bow. So you've hunted archery deer in Arizona probably your whole life. Is that right?
Yeah, it's pretty safe to say I've hunted it quite a bit. Definitely enjoyed some successful hunts on those early archery hunts and even on the December, January hunts for sure too.
And so you took up a passion with this whole change and the commission and the department doing something different. Can you walk us through a little bit of that, your involvement and what has happened in Arizona?
Yeah, I can definitely talk to you about this. So let just give you a little background on myself. Obviously, I'm born and raised in Arizona, avid hunter. I'm the chairman of Bow Hunting in Arizona Record Book Committee. I'm on the board of the Arizona Bow Hunters Association, where I do the liaison with the Game and Fish Department. And so, I mean, I've always been involved in hunting, involved in the outdoors. And back in the spring of 2020, when the hunt recommendations came out, we saw a dramatic cut in over-the-counter archery deer opportunities. And so those hunts that were being cut there were 34 over-the-counter hunts that were affected, 23 hunts completely removed, a couple of hunts moved to a draw, and then some mule deer opportunities gone away. And so that concerned me, obviously, being a bow hunter, trying to figure out kind of like why, what are we doing this for? What's the purpose behind it? I'm trying to understand why that was going to occur. And so, and kind of diving into that, I put together some proposals and went to the commission because basically they give you a 30-day window to comment. The hunt recommendations come out. Those hunt recommendations basically set the hunt rules for, typically it's a 2-year window. It was going to be a 1-year window. And so I went and I commented to the commission. I got all the data that I could because I just didn't understand why they were going to do that. And I didn't feel that it was necessary to do all of the things that they were trying to do. And so in doing that, and I think I mentioned in doing that, in looking in the data, you looked at the harvest data, and the way the Game and Fish Department kind of works is that 20% of the total harvested deer allocated in a unit to archers. So that's 20% of the general rifle hunts, the youth hunts, and muzzleloader hunts, whatever their success rate, they allocate a number of 20% for archery deer hunters to harvest. And so when that number gets exceeded, they do things based off the hunt guidelines, which are set for 5 years, to restrict success or reduce success. Well, in looking into the kind of the numbers of it, what concerned me more than anything was that they were making these recommendations and these changes for the 2021 season, and they were doing it because of 2020 numbers. And we all know what happened in 2020 and 2019 with COVID and people not being at work. And we saw a dramatic increase in people spending time in the woods. And because of that, we saw, an increase of like 4,000 tags sold. We saw an increase in harvest success. And so I started digging into it even further. And what I first kind of learned that was surprising to me is that when I had got all the numbers and I'd made a presentation, you have a 30-day window, and it didn't matter. Like that was the thing that struck a chord with me, is that it didn't seem to matter what you said or what facts you presented. You weren't going to get any change or buy-in from the department and the commission. And so that kind of rubbed me wrong, because like, I feel like if you haven't, we deal with a lot of different types of hunters, and some are very articulate and take the time to kind of do the research, and some just throw things out on social media and stuff, and it doesn't really have much backing. But I feel like when you take the time to kind of look into the backing up your numbers, you should at least have some weight behind what you're saying, and people should at least take a chance to listen and kind of open up the chains of communication to talk. And so, anyways, they went forward with basically removing all the hunts. It was 34 hunts that got altered. We lost a bunch of opportunities to hunt. And what was interesting is that in doing that, they didn't change the way they sold tags. They still sold the same number of tags exactly the same way, but they just cut out a bunch of places to hunt. So in trying to come up with an alternative to where we could all continue the opportunity to hunt, I came up with a threshold model where we would use similar to our bear hunting opportunity in Arizona, where basically they could take the data that they have and set a specific number of deer for mule deer and whitetail that they want harvested in a unit. And then once those deer were harvested, because people would have to report the information in, they could, close those units down. And so to me, it gave everybody an opportunity to hunt, including non-residents as well as residents. It opened up all the other units back. My goal was to open up those 34 units back to us, give us the opportunity to hunt those units. And we succeeded in that. Like, all of those hunts are back open. And the other thing is that on top of this, that kind of morphed from all this, was trying to get the department to go to mandatory reporting. I think it's amazing to me, the pushback from the department heads and the personnel against mandatory reporting, and the justification of, hey, our data is good enough. And I just don't find that to be an accurate statement. And just the kind of round number that's really interesting to me is that in 2020, they sent out 7,000 surveys, and they only had, they sent out 28,000 surveys. They only had 7,000 respond. And of those, only 814 people put that they killed a deer. But when you look at their numbers based on their extrapolation using the equations they use, they put that we killed 3,654 deer. So we really only documented that we killed 814 deer. But based on the equation they use, they estimated that we killed 3,654 deer. And that estimate is being used to determine how many deer we can harvest. I mean, I think we owe it to wildlife. I think we owe it to the sportsmen to have all the data. And so the two pushes for me were, let's get to mandatory reporting, and let's get these hunts back to us that were taken away. And so, in fairness, I worked with a lot of organizations. I worked with the department. They were willing to let me in and talk to me. I worked with commissioners, and there were commissioners that were very willing to have conversations with me. Commissioner Guggenauer, Commissioner Davis, Commissioner Geiler, all at some point or another reached out on their own time. We had multiple conversations, and good conversations that, ultimately made a difference. So we were successful in getting back all those hunts and going to a threshold model. Unfortunately, where we haven't been successful quite yet is that the department hasn't fully gone to mandatory reporting. And so the first thing I'll talk about for your people who want to know about Arizona, and I think that the changes, the big thing is that the thresholds and the numbers that they came up with the deer that they allocated to be harvested in a unit, I would argue are very low. And I think that's what has people concerned. Some of these units will close probably in the early season. Some of them will not. Um, and what I'll tell people with that is that I expected them to be low because if the department's going to try something new, they don't want to overshoot or over harvest anything. They're going to start low and work their way up. I anticipate that as we get to an e-tag system, which I believe is coming, the commission definitely gave direction to the department to go to mandatory reporting. And as we get there, I anticipate that one of two things will happen. We're either going to get more tags and more deer that we can harvest, or they're going to eventually move everything to a draw. And I'm not sure if they're going to do that or not. I don't think that benefits anyone. But they did listen. So I will give the commissioners credit. I will give, they pushed back against some of the department personnel who didn't still fought me through this the whole way. And they gave them direction to go to the threshold model, it was exciting. I felt it was a win. Do I believe the numbers are low? Yeah. I mean, I do. And so,
but don't you feel, Brian, that the numbers being low is probably a product of obviously a lot of things, but were these numbers set by biologists, local biologists? Or are they just trying to stay way under that 20%? Because that 20% still exists in the guidelines. Is that correct?
Yeah, the 20% was a calculation back in the day in 2008. There's a report done by Brian Wakeling where it was a calculation based off of those numbers that I told you earlier. Now it's just become an adopted 20%. So no one has done the calculation and broken it out and even revisited it. It's just more of an accepted 20% because they felt like that was a fair allocation based on what was there. And so I didn't even try to fight that argument because I didn't feel like that was an argument that was winnable. But their 20% numbers are based off of 2019 and 2020 harvest data, which I have. It's the total number of deer harvested. The problem is that 20% is supposed to be based off of a 3-year harvest. And for obvious reasons, because it's you need kind of to extrapolate it out when you have a year like 2020, where many of the units saw double, the number of deer harvested in them. Some of them were pushing over, double. And so I get it, but they only used 19 and 20. They didn't even use 8. They didn't use 16, 17, or 18 because they said that the data was inconclusive and not accurate enough. And so
don't you love that from a state? Like we fight that currently. We're fighting it in Utah, Wyoming, this whole, if I get 400 samples, responses from a random sample size, it's perfect data and it doesn't even matter. It's going to cost us too much to sample everyone. And I'm like, I don't understand that. I can't wrap my head around it.
What I found is it's almost like that there's a person in there that is your, he's your stats guy. Well, if you remove the stats guy from breaking out those equations, then that stats guy doesn't have a job anymore. So it's clinging to that, saying, hey, this is perfect. We've ran all the data. We've ran all the analysis. And this will still, if you have the X amount of percentage, it still gives you an accurate count, which I don't know how you can get more accurate than 100% like harvest report.
And to Brian's point, like you said, Brian, 1 year to the next is not equal on archery deer hunting. You've got weather, you've got amount of people in the field, you've got units they're focusing on, deer movements. I mean, so many things. It could swing quite a bit year to year, right?
Yes. And I mean, and that's, just the numbers from 19 to 20, we only saw roughly a 4,000 tag increase, but according to their numbers, we saw 1,100 more deer killed. And I believe that there were more deer killed, but that's just their stats. And so we should ask for better. We should want better. I feel like we did get some benefits to this and working through it. I do believe it's going to make it a little more difficult for the non-resident guy to stay on top of what's going on and make sure they're paying attention to what units come in. Because yes, you could put together a trip with your buddies. You could drive 12 hours down from Utah or wherever and come hunt here. And then, in the middle of your hunt, 3 days after you set up camp, you could be like, oh man, I've got to move and I've got to hunt a different unit. I do see that as potentially being problematic, but the thing I want to, the benefit to the non-residents is, man, is that like you still have a great opportunity here. I hate to see it go away, and that's what I fought for to keep it is to keep those opportunities available, because I think they can maintain them if they want to. It's really, I mean, I understand how government entities work. I'm employed by one, so I get it, but it's really difficult to get guys or gals to accept something different. And it's just, man, it's a little bit disheartening, because I feel like Garth said earlier, if we can get all the data, why would we not have all the data? I mean, and in the research I did, Game and Fish did a study of 6 or 7 agencies that went to mandatory reporting, and they all cited it as being a success. None of them cited it as not being a success. And it's a very simple implementation. And I'm hopeful that when we get the e-tag online, that we go to a permanent e-tag, which will require not just mandatory harvest reporting, but full on mandatory reporting. I mean, at a minimum, I'll take mandatory harvest reporting, but I think we should have it all. I mean, it's just defendable. We know we're under attack by a lot of different organizations that don't support hunting. And so I think it's important that we have the defensible data, especially when we're talking about a finite resource, and allocating individuals to harvest animals. That's a finite resource. I mean, we should be able to defend the data as accurately as possible.
Well, I feel like that's what it's really going to come down to, is defending the data, because just like every other agency, I can see why an agency would want to move towards a draw versus over the counter, for a couple reasons, especially where you're starting to put caps and limits on the number of non-resident tags that can be purchased as part of that. And the reason is just like what you see that Arizona has done, with these, I guess, once in a lifetime, or these specialty tags that they have come on. They get they make so much money on application fees that if they just went strictly to application, they could make a lot of money off application fees alone, over and above what you're currently getting just on selling that license. So I can see where there's motivation for them to do that. But you're right, Brian. Like, there's true over-the-counter tags that you can buy. They are hard and getting harder and harder to get every single year, and more states are going away from it. So, that's the one thing I definitely applaud you in trying to keep this around and come up with a system to keep it around, because, I mean, it's just they're going away.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that I do believe that at some point Arizona is going to probably follow suit of a lot of these other states and end up going to a draw. And I don't mind that, as long as you can back it up with the data. I think that's the hardest thing for me, is that when you make a change or do things and it's unsupported by data, and you've basically just made a decision and have not even reached out and talked to people about it. I mean, we've seen it in Arizona with the lion harvest reporting, and most notably, they just got rid of all of the spring archery bear tags that were draw tags completely are gone now. There will be no more spring bear hunts. And that wasn't even on the table. That wasn't even the discussion point. And then all of a sudden it comes out and they're gone. And so, I mean, if you're making those decisions and they're supported by, management and biology, like, I'm all for it. There's nothing I can argue about it, but it doesn't always seem like the decisions are made, utilizing and evaluating the data. And that's something that I think that we should get better at, and we should expect and want more of. It's been a very interesting process going through this. Some of the very big names involved in a lot of these organizations that are involved in, wildlife management and organizations that support particular species within the state. I mean, I got some pretty strong pushback from some of them, and I got some big support from others, on just simply mandatory reporting. Like, I was just baffling to me that anybody would fight against mandatory reporting, but I did get some pushback from some pretty big names in the state. And then on the other flip side of that, I got, support from guys like 𝗙𝗵𝗪 who have been around for years and have been involved in this. And he's like, no, we've been asking for mandatory reporting for years. And so, I mean, it's just, I think that they should engage the public more. And if you're going to engage the public, it's not just going through emotion. Like if people take the time to put together, and get research, then it would be nice to listen to the public when they have recommendations. And I mean, that's what I felt was the biggest win about this, is that a lot of people who have been involved in things like this ahead of me, the guys that I grew up with around when I was a little kid, told me, look, you're not, good luck, do the best you can, but don't be discouraged.
Yeah.
And I felt like we had a win, and we'll see how it goes. I mean, are there going to be some heartache? Yeah, there is. But I mean, we got all the hunts back, 127. Some of those hunts that were gone on the early hunt are now back open.
Right.
Guys get to go hunt them. You've got 8, 9, and 10 back. And some of the numbers are fairly decent. I mean, I think you're going to see a lot of your whitetail units probably stay open. And your down south units for whitetails that guys are hunting are probably going to stay open. But you're going to see your mule deer units close down and things like that. But the thing is they're all there now. And so let's see how it works. I mean, hopefully guys will report like they're supposed to, and the Game and Fish doesn't cite, look, that people are not reporting, so we're having concerns of this. I just hope that people can do what they need to do to stay on top of it so we can maintain an opportunity. I mean, my goal here, I had no intentions of targeting, non-residents versus residents, although I do think that we need to have the data. But the only thing that's come out of it now, because there were a couple commissioners that were very strong about it, was that they're going to limit the total number of tags sold to 10%. But they're not going to limit. I thought it would have been better to limit the number of deer harvested per unit to 10%, but they're not going to do that. They're just going to limit the total number of tags sold. And I guess from a business standpoint, in their perspective, it's probably smart, because when they go on sale, you're going to have to make a decision early to buy a tag.
Yeah.
Most of us are probably going to say, you know what, I'd rather have a tag in my pocket and be able to go if it's open, and if it's not, then I won't go.
Yep.
And there's some tough things to look at, like with how Arizona runs their season structure. I mean, the season starts in August for the early season,
Right.
then followed it up in December. Then there's another one January, but that's for that year's season structure. But the hunting license is only good for the calendar year. So, quite frankly, you're probably going to have guys that are looking at it and pretty much buying that just to go hunting in January. So they're probably going to be looking at the amount of units that are still open in January and deciding whether they not. Well, and I guess they won't even know about January.
You won't know if the harvest quota
Correct.
is met before the January.
Right. So it's a little tricky with the way they run their
tricky.
season dates versus their tag, because they're
I wish-
based off different years.
Personally, I wish Arizona would go to not a calendar year tag, but a regulatory year tag. Whether it's August 15th to August 14th or whatever it is, July 1st or June 30th, but it is going to make it more complicated.
And I don't think that, honestly, I don't think that going to a draw on some of those January hunts is a bad idea. I mean, that's it's
Sure.
got to be one of the greatest bow hunting opportunities in the entire United States to hunt mule deer and whitetails in the rut in Arizona. It's just, there are some units that are not going to attract anybody to put in for. So like, you're going to have to work those out. But like your 9, your 10, your 15s, where all of the non-residents come across and hunt right there in Kingman and stuff, those are units that you could make a draw and probably do it. It's just, you got to work it. You got to think outside the box and try to come up with some other plans. And I mean, right now, this is the best thing that I could come up with and get pushed through. And I mean, I got a lot of support with it. Obviously, there are a lot of people that had questions because they thought the numbers of thresholds were so low. But I mean, I think deer numbers in general, especially mule deer numbers, are struggling throughout the West. And so, I mean, it's not a terrible opportunity to kind of regulate some of that stuff. It's just a lot of guys would like to see some of those regulations also spread out across the rifle hunts too, not just impacted on the archery hunters. And, my goal on this was not to take anything away from any other weapon group. It was to just maintain the 20% and keep it open to the archers so that we didn't have to take from anybody else. And I mean, that's ultimately where we're at. Do I think it's going to morph from here? Yeah, I do. I'm not sure what it's going to look like. I mean, it's just tough because it seems like we're losing all these over-the-counter opportunities, and with social media and some of your influencers and stuff like that publishing great hunting opportunities, people are following this stuff. I wouldn't worry about YouTube that much. There are some others out there that definitely put some spotlight on some things. But it is what it is. Everybody wants to enjoy the outdoors, enjoy the opportunity to come hunt, and kind of go from there.
Now, Brian, let me ask you a little bit. We're familiar with these harvest quotas very popular with lions and bears, like you said. We got Montana unlimited sheep, very similar, where a hunt actually closes down once a harvest quota has been met or a female harvest quota has been met. But most of those species, and correct me if I'm wrong, but are all required check-in states or species. You have to physically
Correct.
present your sheep or your bear or your lion for inspection and sealing. But how do you envision this going? Do you see abuse of that, or do you think we're going to be okay?
Well, I mean, I would be remiss if I told you that I didn't think that there are going to be people that are going to abuse it. But just like anything, I mean, you have a time frame to check an animal in, and with this hunt and then with bears in Arizona, it closes sundown on Wednesday. Well, if you kill a bear on Tuesday or Monday or Tuesday, you have some grace period to check it in, and I'm sure that guys are not checking things in until the following Thursday. They're still within the guidelines, which means the hunt stays open for an additional week. So you're going to
Right.
get some of that. You're going to get guys that don't check deer in at all. I mean, it's going to happen, but I mean, do we set regulations and do we set rules and punish the law-abiding
Yeah.
citizen for the one percenters?
No, no. And I kind of am thinking of it on the opposite side, not so much of being abused by hunters. My worry was non-hunters, anti-hunters going out and buying tags and reporting kills to shut hunts down. Do you even think that's a thing, or is that too
I mean,
far-fetched?
I wouldn't put it past anybody at this point in time to do that kind of stuff. I mean, obviously it's an investment, because you have to buy a tag, you have to buy a license and do that stuff. But I mean, that's still false reporting. It's still a violation of the law. It's still a criminal offense.
Sure.
You're
Yeah.
still illegally reporting the harvest of an animal. So I mean, if people are going to do that, I don't think we've seen that, Austin, in Arizona, when it comes to, um, well, I guess it's mandatory check-in on other things, so it doesn't really apply. So it is a concern. I'm not going to lie; it's not the most perfect scenario all the way around. I mean, once we have an e-tag, and you have mandatory reporting through an e-tag and stuff like that, I think it will be more helpful and more
Yeah.
you know fail-proof, I guess, is the way to do it, because the e-tag is the way to go to solve a lot of these problems. Just permanently go to a full-time e-tag and move on with our lives. I mean, everybody has phones, everybody can figure it out, and I mean, you pretty much have cell phone service everywhere these days.
Yeah. No, that's true. Well, I think that's good. We're just looking at some of those quotas. Like you said, they're low, but hunts are going to start on a Friday, and they're going to roll till at least the next Wednesday, regardless of what happens.
Yeah.
And then it's going to reset. So hopefully they're super up to date with their online website as deer get checked in, called in, whatever, and we'll know Thursday morning if this unit's still open or not, or if I got to pack up and leave before the sun comes up. Is that kind of the idea?
I mean, if I didn't tell you that I was concerned about the IT capabilities of the Game and Fish Department, I would be lying to you, because I mean, we've seen some of those struggles that we've seen over the years, and again, they continue to maintain their IT in-house, rather than outsourcing things like the draw. And we've seen how those struggles have occurred, and I know that that's a concern. I mean, are they able to maintain it and keep it up to date? But I mean, that's on them. That's their responsibility, um, to do that. So I mean, I'm kind of curious to see how it plays out. Um, on kind of a different note, they just announced, what is it, 12 additional hunts now that you can put in for those kind of once in a lifetime
Mm-hmm.
hunts that they just announced for. And I mean, that's 100% a money grab, and they put it right in
Mm-hmm.
there. It's very clear they're trying to raise money. And I'm curious as to why, because we know that if they go to a draw for all of archery deer, it's going to cost them $1 million to $1.5 million. So you have to supplement that income. And
Yep.
so how are you going to supplement that income is the question, because most guys who have been building points in Arizona who archery deer hunt are not going to cash in 10 or 12 or 15 points to go on just an archery deer tag. So
Sure.
they know, I mean, the department personnel has already put I think Amber's estimate was somewhere, a considerable amount of money. I don't want to, it was somewhere around $1 million that they would lose. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious as to why are they all of a sudden doing these. I mean, I get it. It's a great opportunity, and sure, I'm going to put in for them because it would be cool to have the tag, but it's definitely a money grab. They say it's to raise money. So what are they trying to supplement? Why are they trying to raise additional money? I guess is kind of my question there.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd want to be managing the budget for an organization like this. Like, where's the butterfly division? How much money did you guys spend?
There's so many moving parts, and when
It's tough.
especially when you get most of these state agencies run it into Division of Natural Resources, and they don't separate the wildlife resources versus parks and recreation and things like that. And it all gets intertwined together, and you got to come somewhere out in the wash, and it's oof.
I think Arizona's unique though, because I think that all the money the revenue they generate for the Game and Fish Department through tags and licenses is protected and allocated strictly back to that stuff. I don't think they.
It's good.
I don't know the exact terminology, but I'm pretty sure it's all allocated and protected to be spent there, and not. It can't be taken from the governor and put towards something else. It's allocated for that.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it is definitely. I mean, it's a tough time to allocate resources and money. I mean, everybody's always trying to balance budgets and manage wildlife for sure. It's just, I just hope that we get to continue to do what we love to do. I mean, I do think that Arizona has it has one of the better draw systems in the aspect of it gives every year. I don't care who you are. If you've never applied, you have a chance to draw. It may be very small, but you always have a chance to draw a tag, which I think is beneficial to keeping people engaged and being interested. And if you've ever been lucky enough to pull a crazy tag, you know that feeling. I mean, and that just keeps you putting back in every year and applying for these absolutely astronomical draws, because you know how awesome it can be if you get lucky enough to draw a tag.
Yep, for sure. No, it's a special state. I mean, we're still going to hunt it. Our biggest thing is we want everybody to be informed so they can plan ahead. For this season, talking the 2022 fall season, August and December. But then if you're non-resident, you're going to have to really stay on top of it when they decide how they're going to sell these non-resident over-the-counter tags, because they're going to be capped.
Yep.
They got that in place with that congressional bill. But they're trying to decide how they can sell them, because selling at a licensed vendor in a paper booklet, like many of us have bought them at Walmart or Sportsman's before, that is no longer a thing for non-residents with a 2023 tag. That's out the window because it's coming out of a quota, so it's going to have to be online or at a department office if they can figure out the online system. Otherwise, it's going to have to be at a department office over the phone. They don't know yet, but hopefully soon we'll have some answers on that.
Yeah, and what's tricky about that too means they're going to have to, I mean, the department, even if you buy at the department office, they're going to have an online system for tracking the sales of other department offices between the offices, so that they can make sure they're not overselling the amount of licenses. So I don't know.
The problem we see, Brian, is like Idaho did this, right? So you got 12,000 non-resident general elk tags in Idaho. Up till 2 years ago, there would be 3,000 or 4,000 of those still available into the season. Then you start limiting COVID. Everybody starts wanting to go hunting. Now they sell out 12,000 elk tags in an hour and a half. And so I'm worried that just by limiting this to say 3,000 tags, well, heck, that's all we've ever sold in Arizona. But just the rush from people saying, hey, it's limited opportunity now, it's going to be a disaster. To Garth's point, now you got people camping out in front of department offices, buying for their friends. Did they oversell? You know, how are they going to manage that? It is a little bit of a can of worms for them.
Yeah, they got to figure that out. I mean, you could potentially do an online draw system for 3,000 tags for those people, and then, you know, just it'd be a statewide over-the-counter archery deer tag, and then they collect a freaking application fee from however many people apply.
Right.
So you just gave them a really good idea in November to basically get those application fees again.
Right.
And I mean,
I don't disagree with that, but if you say you're taking a guy's deer points, now the wheels fall off the bus.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, is the question that was discussed, you know, do you just create a completely separate over-the-counter archery deer draw where it's completely separate to the general and it's no bonus points and it's just random? You know, I mean, do you do that? Because I've had those discussions, and I mean, we're going to see some changes at the department, because Amber's getting ready to retire, so it's yet to be determined exactly who's going to step in and take her place and, you know, move forward with a lot of these changes that are coming up. You know what I mean? So there's definitely changes to be made and decisions that have to be made. It's just, I think they're are a lot of, if they could just develop some groups of people and allow people to have conversation, I think they would be surprised at some of the ideas that they could come up with from getting people like you engaged and myself engaged and some other people engaged in the conversation, because I think there are better ideas out there when you reach out and talk to people, and it would make everything better for all of us.
Yeah. They're going to have to get creative. I would like to see, just thinking about what we said, like when you apply in the June deer draw, you put your first through fifth choice if you put 5 choices.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, it's like, if unsuccessful in my first 5 choices, I would like to be applied for a non-resident over-the-counter archery deer tag. And then it rolls you into the draw all at that same time and keep it a little cleaner. I don't need another draw in the fall.
Yeah, we talked about making it so that the 4th and 5th choices on your application don't use your points. So I mean,
one of those could be archery deer.
Yeah.
Yes, because my thing is that, do you really, as the Game and Fish Department, want to conduct another draw? Like, I wouldn't want to do that.
I would say no. I mean, I'm out.
I will say that I don't think anybody had any tags that they were supposed to get that didn't get this year, from what I understand. I mean, unlike last year, I don't know of anyone that had a mistake. I mean, we've
still got a few we're working on, but they're a little more in depth.
Yeah, there's underlying issues.
Yeah.
I got my tag last year because they didn't issue it to me because of all those the mistakes. So I mean, but it's funny because you call the front office and they're like, "Oh no, we don't do that. You would get your tag." And it's like, no, that's not the way it works. But
it's really hard to draw here, sir.
Yeah, I heard that a number of times.
Yeah. That's what they say all the time, and you're like, really?
Yeah.
So
yeah. You're like,
anyways, well, are you going to Alaska soon or what?
Yep, going to Alaska. And so none of us are hunting the early season in Arizona, but we're hoping some hunts. We're going to kind of see what happens, maybe get down there in December if it doesn't look like things are going to be open into January, on some of the Coues deer stuff.
Yeah.
So we'll kind of see what happens, but appreciate your time today, Brian, and helping us outline this. Obviously, we'll keep covering more as the Arizona archery hunts get going.
Yeah, as they unfold.
Well, I look forward to it, and I hope you guys have a good season up there in Alaska and have fun. And it's hard to believe from things to start opening up, so it's pretty cool.